this is Miss Diorama. In this video, I'm building a New York City brownstone, complete with working lights, windows and doors. This is a long video, so please sit back, relax and enjoy while this diorama comes to life. Let's start with the main entrance. For these doors, I used a variety of materials including 1.5mm mat board, craft board, clear binder covers and tacky craft glue. The front doors have windows in them, and so I began by gluing on the window frames. This was followed with some panels, mouldings and doorstops. I pasted this doorstop on so that it just comes out past the edge of the door. This will stop the other door opening out past this door when they're glued in place. I repeated the same steps with the pieces I cut from craftboard. These ones I'm making from craftboard will be glued onto the backs of the doors I just made before. This will mean that the same features will be on either side of the doors when they're completed. All of the parts here for these doors and throughout this project were cut with a laser cutter. I'm certain I would have found it near impossible to cut some of these details by hand. When built up, all the layers give the doors a realistic 3D appearance. I painted the doors at this point with raw umber acrylic paint to resemble wood. Using a stencil, I cut some glass panels for the windows from a clear binder cover. I glued the panels to the reverse side of each door. Then glued the two parts of the doors together. Here they are, almost finished. First, just a few more doorstops. What I'm painting here are the hinges for the doors, and they'll be covered by the door frame that you can see here. I promise I'll get back to the doors shortly, but first I want to show you how I made a frame and a little portico for the front entrance. I started by gluing pieces together to form a nice 3D arch. attached to the front wall of the building. To make an arch above the doorway, I glued the remaining pieces that I had together. This was glued on, followed by the portico roof structure. Then I glued on some columns. This was the finished entryway surround. I painted the whole piece with a colour resembling brownstone. I then painted the other exterior walls with the same colour. I promised I would get back to the doors. They were attached using tacky glue. I use this glue because it bonds reasonably quickly and dries clear. A door frame made of craft board finishes the doors. For this project, I designed and made 2 different sizes of windows. I made a total of 16, each with its own sliding sash. These 2 frames here represent the 2 different sizes that I was making. These are the external window frames. Here are more parts for the windows, including the interior frames and window panes. Later, I'll be adding clear plastic to these to represent glass. Before I could add the glass, they were all painted brown. Here they all are. In the same way that I did for the main entranceway, I made up an arch to go above each window. And once I completed all 16 of them, I proceeded to glue the arches onto all of the windows. There we go, all finished. These are the external window frames, and therefore they were painted the same colour as the exterior walls. Once the paint on the window frames was dry, it was time to add the glass. To achieve this, I glued half of them onto a clear binder cover. When the glue was dry, I carefully cut them out. Once they were cut out, I glued the fixed panes onto the main window frames. I then glued on the exterior sections of the window frames. You may be able to see here that the clear sheet is now between two window pane frames. I then proceeded to glue the rest of the panes together, and you can see again here, each pane of glass was between two wooden frames. Now for the interior window frames. For each one there were two pieces, and as you may be able to see, one is slightly larger than the other. When these are glued together, a space is created for the lower pane to move up and down. You'll get what I mean when you see this in action. Here they are, finished. Finally, time to attach the windows to the building. I started by gluing the external window frame sections to the building's exterior. I thought they looked good, but I decided they'd look better with some windowsills. I made these by gluing 3 pieces of mat board together, each piece slightly smaller than the previous. This was the result. They were then painted with the colour I was using for the building's exterior. Once the paint had dried, I was able to fix the windowsills in place. Now back to the main entrance wall section. I couldn't forget this window above the portico. Now I can install the moving part of this window. I place the window pane against the external frame, then glue on the interior frame. Don't worry, I'll show you this again shortly. First, this window needs its windowsill. Now the lower window pane can be opened and closed. I applied a frame to this second doorway. I'll revisit this door a bit later. And now for the rest of the windows. I'll show you again. I place the window pane against the external frame, then glue on the interior frame. The pane can now move freely up and down. I place the window panes one by one against the external frames, then glue on each of the interior frames. Finally, these 9 windows are now finished, and you can see how the lower window pane can be opened and closed. I thought this would be a good time to start on the terrace level, so I prepared and painted all of the pieces. I painted the doors with brown acrylic paint. I glued on the window frames. painted the remaining parts for the doors with brown acrylic paint and then set them aside to dry. Now for the glass inserts for the terrace doors. For these, I'm using material cut from a clear binder cover. Again, I use tacky glue because it bonds quite quickly and dries clear. Then I glued the second half of the door to the other side, which encases the glass between the two layers. Then I glued doorstops on the opposite sides of both doors. Then finally, I repainted some areas for a consistent finish. In the same way that the main entrance has an archway feature above it, I wanted the terrace entrance to have one as well. So I glued the parts for this little arch together. I always find it easier to paint parts as I go. These arches are going to form the terrace door frame. As you can see, the inside of this arch is brownstone colour, but the outside is brown. I like to paint pieces like this prior to installation because it can be really hard to paint them once they're installed. Now it's time to assemble the terrace wall. I scored these two lines to allow me to bend the walls into a half hexagon shape. I glued on two of the windows I made earlier. Now is a good time to do some minor touch-ups. Then I applied wallpaper to match the rest of the walls. With the wallpaper done, I could now finish the windows. I added the moving panes, then glued on the frames I made earlier to hold them in place. I glued on the window sills, the doors, and to finish it off, the interior door frame. To make my interpretation of brownstone, first I took some terracotta, white, yellow, and brown acrylic paint colours and mixed these together. This needed to be lighter, so I added more yellow, white and terracotta colours to the mix. Throughout the making of this diorama, I needed quite a few batches of this colour, so naturally I got really good at making it. Now it was time to make the front steps. I prepared all the pieces and arranged them for painting. And then painted them. The step treads, the sides of the steps, the door, and the stair railing. As I mentioned, there's a second front entrance underneath the front steps. For this, I made a door. It was in 2 parts, which I glued together. I bent the hinge. And glued the door in place. With the door complete, I could now put the steps together. One by one, I glued the step treads on. Followed by the porch, and finally by the stair risers. The stairs lead up to the main entrance, which is on the second level, a classic feature of the Brownstone. This second door obviously leads into the ground floor. I decided to add some features to both ground floor doors. I cut these features from craftboard and stuck them onto the doors with glue. I used masking tape to assist me with the transfer of these tiny pieces onto the doors. Once the glue was dry, I repainted the doors brown. Once the paint was fully dry, I attached the door with glue. A door frame made from craftboard was applied as a finishing touch. I decided to include a chimney and some fireplaces in the building. I glued the side piece of the chimney to the front, followed by the other side. that done, I covered the chimney with a brick finish that I printed. This is one of my fireplace mantles, and I'll show you soon how I assembled it. But first, I painted it with white acrylic paint. These are all the parts for the fireplaces. I started by gluing the front moulding to the fireplace surround. These arches will form a firebox. I glued this to the fireplace surround. Then I attached the sides. And then the plinths. And then I made a mantle for the top. I rounded off the edges of the mantelpieces with a file. Then I glued the larger piece to the slightly smaller one. This was glued in place. And that completed my fireplace. I made 3 in total and painted them all with white acrylic paint. Once the paint was dry on the fireplaces, I attached them to the chimney piece. I added an extra arch to the inside to increase the depth of each fireplace. I touched up with white acrylic paint. Then I added a decorative big cap just under the mantelpiece to each of the fireplaces. Then I painted them white to match the fireplaces. Now it was time for the interiors. I prepared some wallpaper pieces by applying matte Mod Podge, which, when dry, gives a durable matte finish. This wallpaper was printed on regular copy paper. I chose this vintage damask design for most of the walls and a brick design for the ground floor walls. Once they were dry, I glued the wallpaper to the inside of the wall pieces. When working with Mod Podge as a glue, I find I have to work quickly because Mod Podge dries pretty fast when spread thin. When applying the wallpaper to the matte board walls, I smooth out any air trapped between the 2 layers. That way, I won't end up with any unsightly bubbles in my wallpaper. As an afterthought, I decided to apply the damask wallpaper to the interior of the bay window section. I applied it in separate pieces to prevent creasing where the walls come together at angles. Using the same method, I applied wallpaper to the remaining interior walls. Once that was done, I then glued the rest of the windows I made earlier onto the rear wall. I followed with the window sills. I added the moving panes, then glued on the frames I made earlier to hold them in place. For the flooring, I followed the same process I used when applying the wallpaper. For the ceilings, I cut and applied some cornice mouldings. I then made up some decorative wainscote features in a square pattern to apply. These I layered for a 3D look. I then painted the ceiling with white acrylic paint. In total, there were 8 ceilings to make. This was the ceiling for the second floor at the front of the building. I made another one the same for the third floor ceiling. Here it is completed. This was the ceiling for the ground floor in the rear part of the building. And I made another one almost exactly the same for the second floor. Notice the U-shaped cutout, that's for the stairwell. This was the top floor ceiling in the rear part of the building. And finally, this was the ceiling over the stairwell in the rear part of the building. Then I moved on to making some lights. I made this chandelier using a variety of materials including wire, aquarium tubing, beads and bead caps, cocktail sticks, LED lights and glue. These little candles are cut from the end of cocktail sticks. This chandelier will be a feature above the main stairs. Meanwhile, I made some wall lights which I glued on the outside wall. To create the wall lights, I glued together semicircles of mat board to form the top and bottom parts of the lights. Which I then painted. For these, I chose a colour called Weapon Bronze by the Army Painter. I then cut a 1 centimetre piece of clear tube in half. And finally, I glued all of the parts together. I made a ceiling light in a similar way, using full circles of mat board which I glued together. I threaded the wires of the LED through the top of the light fixture. To complete this light, these were then glued to a 1 cm piece of clear tubing. I made another 2 chandeliers, this one for the lounge room and this one for the bedroom. Now it was time for the interior wall lights. I glued LEDs to the wall and covered the wires with wallpaper. I made sure to include a light under the front stairs. I installed those interior wall lights I made earlier. And then I tested the lights to make sure they're all working. With all that done, I could now begin assembling the building. First, I glued a ground floor piece to the front main entrance piece. Then a side wall, followed by the bay window wall. That fireplace piece that I made earlier goes here, but will have to wait to be installed later. To install this light, I pushed the wires through a hole I made in the ceiling. Then I glued in the ceiling piece. All of the wiring from the lights installed so far will be hidden by this floor piece. Here's a quick look at the process I use each time I glue in a piece. I repeated the process for each floor. The second and third floors each have a dividing wall with French doors. To make these, I used a piece of mat board which I covered with wallpaper on both sides. I then made the doors. I applied some mouldings. I applied the doors and the door frames. And these are the finished pieces. I added some skirting board details to the rooms. This is the ceiling and dividing wall for the third floor with its lights. I installed it and set things aside to dry. Now moving on to the rear part of the building. I glued one of the side walls to the rear wall. And then I glued in the ground floor. This rear part of the building will house the internal stairs. I gathered all the parts together and painted them. Once the paint was dry, I began to assemble the stairs. I glued on the step treads and stair risers one by one. Believe me, this process was way harder than it looks. This set of stairs will service the first 3 floors. The style of these stairs is U-shape, also known as half-turn style. Now was the time to apply wallpaper before the section under the stairs was closed in. Now it was time for stairway lights. I made these wall lights by cutting a plastic bead cap in half. Then I cut a 1 centimeter piece of clear tube in half and glued half a bead cap to the top and 1 to the bottom of the tube. I covered the stairwell with a piece of craft board covered with wallpaper. And then I installed the wall lights. The stairwell had a space for a cupboard underneath it on the ground floor, so I made a cupboard door with a doorway above for the first floor. Here it is finished. I decided to incorporate another wall light on the ground floor. Again, concealing the wires behind wallpaper and between the ceiling and floor. I added some finishing touches to the stairs before fitting them. for the second floor ceiling and the kitchen light. Another set of stairs was needed to connect the third floor to the rooftop terrace floor. I prepared the parts and began to assemble them. Starting with the centre column, which is hollow for a reason. Each step tread and riser was glued in place one by one. Here they are finished. I really love how these stairs turned out. I made some floor lamps for the top floor. To make them, I first attached the plastic tube from a cotton swab to the wallpaper. I fed the LED wires through the tube. And finally, I made a lampshade out of vellum which I glued in place. On the exterior side of the wall, I attached wall lights matching the other exterior lights. Next, I made a tiny bay window seat for the third floor. I used 1.5mm mat board to make the structural part of the window seat. And I used heavy cardstock for this cover piece and for these feature panels. Once it was finished, I gave it a couple of coats of white acrylic paint. Then I installed it along with some more skirting. Now for the terrace rooftop. I pasted this piece of flooring to the terrace roof. Then I glued the ceiling onto the entrance piece I made earlier. And attached this to the terrace roof along with the side walls. Now for the very top roof and some decorative cornices. I then was able to attach the top floor, hiding the lighting wires between the roof layers. Now to install a chimney piece I made earlier. To make the fireplaces, I printed an image onto vellum and attached one to the back of each fireplace. This chimney will serve a second purpose. It'll contain some lights to make the fireplaces come to life and conceal the wires for the lights in the front part of the building. I attached the last wall and the outside of the chimney. And now back to the third floor in the rear section of the building. I added some skirting. Using my laser cutter, I then cut some stair railing out of craft board. I painted this black to look like wrought iron. When they were dry, I glued the two pieces together to add strength and thickness. But the piece was still flexible enough to bend into a U shape. I then attached the railing around the top of the stairwell. I thought it would be nice to make a cupboard under the spiral stairs that I made earlier, and of course I had to include a light. And so I could install the floor and ceiling above. I threaded the light wires through that hollow column in the stairs. This was an appropriate time to install the kitchen. If you want to see how I made this kitchen and the stove, be sure to check for the link to that video in the description. This little stove flue is hollow, and that's so the light wires could pass through it. I couldn't forget a shelf in the cupboard under the stairs. And a door for the cupboard. I made another little stove for the ground floor. Its function is to hide wires, but it also has another special little feature. I installed it and set the wires aside. Now that all those pieces were in, the final wall was fitted. Then I applied some more little details. I added this wrought iron grate made of mat board to the top of the stairs. I finished off the skirting in this room. Then added the stair railing. I added a cap moulding to the top of the stairwell. Then I applied some skirting to either side of the terrace door. And some stair railing on the very top floor. I decided to add some sidewalls to the terrace. I also slipped in some craftboard hinges. You'll see why. Now it's looking more like a brownstone. But first, some final touches. I closed off the top of the chimney with a crown. Added some crown moulding. Some terrace floor moulding. The very top roof. Then I added some mouldings to the front facade. Some more terrace floor moulding. And I added some more mouldings on the rear facade. The lights are all working. This brownstone needs a base. It needs to be hinged in the same way as the building. I joined these two pieces of XPS foam together at one side with a hinge. This hinge was made from two pieces of craft board glued together. I added a second hinge to the outside edges to reinforce the joint. The battery pack will be concealed underneath the building. I thought some street lamps would look great at the front. To make these, I used cotton buds, a series of laser cut circles, LEDs and some clear tubing. I cut the ends off the cotton buds, which left me with two hollow plastic tubes. I assembled each set of laser cut circles, and you'll notice a hole through the middle of some of these. There is a reason for this. Once they were all assembled, I painted them black, then glued one set to the top of each clear tube. Then glued the hollow cotton bud sticks to the bases and threaded the LED light through the base of the lamp, then down through the hollow tubes and out the base. And finally, I glued the top part to the rest of the lamp. Here are the completed lamps ready for installation. But first, back to the terrace. I made some chimney pots with a straw and wrapped strips of cardstock around the straw to form a cap and flashing. I made 3 chimney pots in total. The whole building needed one last coat of paint. Now it was time to attach the building to the base. First, I fitted the street lamps. And now for the landscaping. First, I applied glue and then cement render. Once the glue was dry, I applied black acrylic paint. Once the paint was dry, it was now time to add some paving. I applied some glue to the base and stuck down a sheet of paving. Then I applied paving to the courtyard and the footpath. All of the paving was cut on my laser cutter. Once the glue was dry, I painted over everything with black acrylic paint. I thought a tree would look nice on the footpath, so I took a twig from the garden. Then I applied some Woodland Scenics lichen and followed this with a sprinkle of coarse turf over the whole lot. I marked a spot for the tree and made a hole. Then I pushed the tree down into the hole. By this stage, it was nearly complete, with the exception of a few tiny details. I added a wrought iron fence to the courtyard. of course, a gate was needed. I made the fence and the gate using 1.5mm mat board. I used my laser cutter to cut these pieces out. I used the same method to make some stair railing for the front steps. I also made a matching guardrail for the terrace. And for around the tree. Traditionally, brownstones were built using bricks, and the brownstone was only applied to the front facade, so I decided to replicate this by adding brick to the sides of this tiny brownstone. Using my laser cutter, I cut these bricks out of craft board. To recreate the brick look, I undercoated with white acrylic paint, followed by a coat of yellow. Followed by a brown wash. I thought this diorama needed more plants, so I made some planters using mat board. This one was made to stand on the ground. I made 2 of these. And then I made some window boxes. In case you're wondering, when I need parts for things like these little planters and everything else in this diorama, I draw the parts I need in Lightburn, which is my favourite control software for laser cutters. Then I use my laser cutter to cut the parts. I made 12 window boxes in total. To finish these off, I painted them to make them look like they were made of brownstone. Then I planted them up with foliage. Then I glued a window box to each windowsill at the front of the building. And now, back to the brick. Once the brown wash on the brickwork was dry, I applied a pasty grey wash to define the mortar lines. Then I added brown to random bricks and grey to others for extra dimension, and finished the look with a few more washes of colour to bring it all together. After that, I painted some colourful flowers to break up the green in the planters. First some purple ones, and then some pink ones. Finally, I made a cover using craftboard to put over the battery compartment. I painted it with black acrylic paint and glued the hinges to the diorama base. And with that, the diorama was finally complete. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my future tutorials. Bye everyone, and see you next time.